Hi, welcome to the Let's K12 Better podcast. This podcast is a project between Mama of All Capes and her kids.
Hi!
In our podcast, we will cover a variety of subjects involving K12 education and family life.
We will talk about the ways that parents, kids, and educators can improve K12 education and family life. We encourage you to join our conversation on social media using the hashtag Let's K12 Better.
Let's jump into episode 21 of the Let's K12 Better podcast.
Since the death of Breonna Taylor, we've held many family discussions about race, intersectionality, racial identity, coalition building across race and culture, police brutality, justice, and education equity.
But discussions are not enough. How do we challenge our awareness of how our actions, our votes, and our long-held beliefs and practices contribute to the racial injustice experienced by some in our society? How do we sit with discomfort? And as we do begin to engage, is it possible to hold ourselves, our neighbors, and our legislators accountable for supporting conditions that encourage the success for some and failure for others?
Full transparency, we had a completely different episode lined up for this Friday to celebrate National Voter Registration Day and to discuss the importance of getting out to vote. We want to make sure that all eligible U.S. voters have checked their voter registration status this week. We also want to encourage people of voting age to become informed voters. We have to connect the dots, y'all. Take a moment to think about what it is like for some Black people to contribute tax dollars to a system that could kill them. And beyond personal accountability or completely upending the system, how do we address this? And why is it important for any and all of us to care? We wanted to meet the moment, and we hope that this episode will inspire you to have discussions as a family, not just about race, but about how we move forward. We hope that you begin to investigate how the society we vote for creates the equitable and inequitable parameters for our collective experiences. All right, so we're going to have a family discussion about Breonna Taylor, about talking about race. But first, we want to make sure that people are informed in their discussion. So we went through the timeline of Breonna Taylor's death, which included learning about how the police obtained the warrant to search Taylor and Walker's home. You know, we dug into the protests and the settlement and the ruling. We recommend that if families and communities are going to hold discussions, that they first inform themselves with the proper information about the events that led to Breonna Taylor's death. So be informed. That is our first thing. Make sure that you have informed discussions. It's good to talk from experience and feelings, but we also want to make sure that we're talking about the right thing and spreading the right information. Okay, so we're going to jump into our first question. The police that fatally shot Breonna Taylor while they were executing their no-knock warrant in search for narcotics, we want to say that no narcotics were found, right? They were not charged with her murder. They weren't charged with Breonna Taylor's murder. Instead, they were charged with a Class D felony of wanton endangerment, which puts the focus on the bullets that went into their neighbor's home and not the ones that killed Breonna Taylor. You and I actually talked about this really briefly this morning. What do you think about that ruling?
I think that, first of all, it's crazy that they didn't get charged for her murder because even though they weren't looking, they still shot her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's not fair because even though they still got bullets into the neighbor's place, they should have still charged them for putting the neighbors in the neighbor's place.
Mm-hmm.
But they should have also got charged for her murder.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
I agree with Sophia that they should have charged them for murder and for all the other stuff, but mostly for the murder of Breonna Taylor.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you about the settlement, right? Breonna Taylor, about a week ago, her family received a settlement of $12 million from the city. So, like, what do you think about that?
I think that's not enough. And that I have two things to say. One, that they shouldn't just get money; they should get justice served. Like, because it's and this is leading into my second thing. Like, $12 million is not enough, because once you pay all the bills, it's gonna leave you with like about $4 million, and then you got to think about paying the lawyers. So when you factor in all those things, they're barely getting money because they have to pay all those expenses and taxes. And you shouldn't just get money, because you should get justice served.
Mm-hmm. So money, though a gesture, it is a gesture, right?
Yeah.
It's still not necessarily a just gesture. Is that what you're saying?
I agree.
Yeah.
You agree?
Can I say what I think? So I kind of agree with her on, like, they have to pay it off, because, like, if they pay it off, they're probably gonna be left with the same money they had before they got the money. So I mean, what's the point?
So it's not just a free for all, like you just get money.
You get $20 million.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was 12, not 20. It was 12. So I have a question, right? You know, when things like this happen, how should we, as outsiders looking at a situation, what should we be thinking? What are some things that we should be thinking?
I think that we should think about not the bad stuff that happened before she died or the people died. I think we should, like, think about like the good things, or like how they were, or like not about the bad things.
So we want
and the stuff they did for the community and things like that.
So we want to think about their memory and their legacy in a positive light,
not a bad one,
not the negative light. Okay, what do you think?
We need to look at the positive side. We also need to look at the negative side, because we need an even spectrum of their life. We shouldn't just be thinking of one side of the narrative. And also we need to factor in the situation and see if it was just, because we can't just assume, even if it is justice for Breonna Taylor, where justice needs to be served. We also need to factor in the other things that caused the death.
So we need to think about the entire situation, is what you're saying?
Yeah, we need to look back
not
at
just
the situation.
At the moment that she was murdered. Look at all of the events that led up to it, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And by the past, do you mean the events that led up to her murder, or do you mean like her past, like when she was 12?
Like the events that led up to her murder.
Or like the events, like, say, from the day or week before.
So, like they said, I think it's really smart to look up to the events
Leading up to
leading up to, because maybe that'll give clues to why it happened or how it happened, or how we can prevent it in the future.
So a lot of things have culminated into making this unfortunate incident happen. Yeah. Okay, so, we're talking about all of the things that lead into this moment that led into Breonna Taylor's death, right? Let's talk about police engaging with communities of color, right? What needs to happen? What needs to change?
So I think that we should change that police officers and people who are working as community workers, essential workers, everyone who just works, they should get racial training. Because telling them don't be racist is good, but we have to actually make sure that they're not going to be racist towards people.
So we need people who are in service jobs and civil service jobs, like police, essential work, firemen, even educators, right? Like teachers are civil servants too, right? Those people need cultural competency training.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure I got it right. Okay, what do you think?
Adding on to Garpy, yes, they need racial training, but they also need accurate racial training that will hold them accountable accountable for the racist things they do, and they need to like learn from those things to make them less racist and to make them less racially biased, so that when they do come in contact with a person of color, they're not being racist, they're not jumping into actions that are like not the best for that situation, and that could prevent a lot of deaths of color.
Deaths of people of color. Okay, I appreciate that. All right, so there's been a lot that has been happening since we've been in the COVID-19 situation, where people have been forced to be hyper-focused on police brutality issues of race and injustice. So that's created a lot of fatigue. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like that is fatiguing. There are people who, slowly but surely are like, now, like, I'm done with this, right?
Because of the back to school season.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to ask you guys, like, how do we prevent fatigue around racial justice issues?
I think we can prevent fatigue by kind of keeping the flame lit, by not just doing, like, people are getting fatigued by doing the same two things, just social media and protesting. Mm-hmm. We need to also be having discussions with our families and teaching these kind of things in schools, and we need to be able to spread the word out in multiple ways faster.
So we talked a bit about, or you talked a bit about social media, right? Yeah. And that people are just looking at social media. People are getting fatigued because we are also, unfortunately, by the algorithm, stuck in our own echo chambers, right? In this moment, there are people who are fatiguing. How do we reach out to other people? How do we get new voices in this space?
I feel like Naima's right when she said all those things about talking to your family. Also, other good ways are to reach out to your community, like not just marching, but like having a talk with your whole like community, talking to your neighbors about it, everyone that you know, just talk to them about it, because that grows.
Also, going back to social media, if you have an audience on social media, you can use that your influence and your audience to spread the word to other people. That it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily other people on social media. It could be their family members, their friends, their neighbors, their grandparents. Because if it can start somewhere and it can grow into multiple places, and that can really help a cause.
Okay.
If you have permission, what you could do to welcome people is you can put signs on houses or school buildings.
That's a great idea too, right? Like, especially if you're having like an open forum or a community event to talk about racial justice or police brutality. Yeah. You want to post notes and just say, hey, we're doing this on this night. Everybody's welcome. That's pre-COVID, right? Right now.
Or post-COVID.
Post-COVID, right? But right now, Zoom meetings, Google Hangouts, there's so many Google Meets. There's so many FaceTime, right? There's other platforms that virtually you can have these community discussions and school-wide discussions. Should schools engage in discussions on race and racial justice and police brutality? What do you think?
I think yes, because I think that we talked about this, I think, our last episode, but they should enroll it in maybe the history, a lot of other places, like reading, math, science.
So in the curriculum is a place to break in discussions about race and racial justice.
Also, you can play games in class that are that can tell about other people and their culture.
So doing culturally relevant things, right? Culturally relevant
teachings.
Right. Okay. So teaching is one way, but what about if we're trying to enact community-wide change?
Excuse me, but before we do the next question, I want to add on to Sophia by saying it's not just different subjects. There should also be a subject of its own about this, because this is a very important topic that
I agree.
Most people don't learn throughout their lifetime. So that can really play into like racism and racially biasedness.
So it's not just about having the curriculum be culturally relevant and talking about race and racial justice. It's also having a standalone course.
Exactly.
Yes,
but it has to be mandatory.
Why does it have to be mandatory?
Because everyone needs to learn to be kind to each other, and everybody needs to learn to be anti-racist, because it's going to make the world a little bit easier, because most of the problems root from racism and root from conflicts like that. So, yeah.
So, wait, I want to push a little bit more harder on your point. But, like, so is racism just being about being nice to each other?
No, it's about,
what is anti-racism about?
Anti-racism is like, for example, like not hiring someone because they're black. Like, the reason I said that the world's going to be better would be better is because people wouldn't feel unwelcome. People wouldn't think that nobody wants them, or nobody wants to hire them. Nobody wants them at their school, stuff like that.
So you're saying it's also about addressing spaces that do not welcome people that are different.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I think personally anti-racism is acknowledging that one, we're not all the same, and two, acknowledging that everyone should be welcome into a space no matter who inhabits that space, because we should all be respected and treated with dignity and respect.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge you guys. We're going to dig a little bit deeper on anti-racism work. So it's not just about how people feel, and it also is not just about making spaces more welcoming, right? It's anti-racism work is about addressing the systems in place that create the perfect conditions for someone who looks like Breonna Taylor to be killed in bed in her home, versus if she were to live in a suburb where they don't execute no-knock warrants to this extent, right? They don't feel like they should just ram into someone's home in the way that they did, right? So anti-racism work, yes, it's about ensuring that people feel welcome, respected. It's about addressing the spaces that people are inhabiting, but it's also, and it's most importantly, about ensuring that our policies and practices are equitable across the board for everyone. So we're going to pivot a bit. We've been talking about all of the things that people can do, right? So we've been talking about like what can people do to engage, and we're always encouraging like everybody engage, black people engage, non-black people of color engage, white people engage. Let's talk a little bit about white paralysis, all right? And I don't know if this is a term or if I'm just making this up, but I've been seeing this a lot and hearing about this a lot, where white people sit in inaction either because they're afraid to do something wrong, or because people are telling them to shut up and sit down and let the people of color speak only, and you just listen, right? Which is a bit frustrating because we need everybody in this work. So what are your thoughts on this notion of white paralysis?
So I think that yes, we should have white people listen to us and listen to other people of color, but they also need to get involved too. They also need to, after they listen, take action. They don't need to just listen and walk away and say, oh, I did something. They need to listen, take action, and then if they do something wrong, then they need to learn from that. They don't need to just stop doing it because they did something wrong.
So mistakes are inevitable, especially when you're first learning how to engage in very serious work, right? Or even the process of unlearning, right? we're all in a process of like learning new things and and learning new tactics and unlearning some of the things that we thought were true but are not, right?
So we need to learn the real.
Yeah. And we also need to give grace, right? You know? So grace is this idea that like you're not going to make someone feel extremely terrible for making mistakes, right? You're giving them the space to grow and to learn, right? So how do we give grace to others who are learning how to engage in racial justice work?
I think we can give grace by encouraging them to like keep learning and keep on going, and like being helpful, and not like say, "Oh, you suck at this. You're never gonna get it." You should say things like, "You can do it. You can get it." And even if
like in sports.
Yeah.
What about what are some of the ways that they can take action?
Going down to like marches or talking about it within your community, like we said before. Talking about it to your family, talking about it to anyone, because when you talk about it, they also realize it's important and they talk to the people they know about it, and soon it spreads to everyone.
I think that we should encourage people to make the right decisions, and if they make a mistake, I think that we shouldn't make fun of them. I think that we should respect that they're learning, and that the people who make the mistake, they should learn from what they experience.
So we want to make sure that we're elevating people's humanity along the process, no matter who they are. Is that what you're saying? I love that. You know, so there's different kinds of work, right? You know, we said this in the episode 7, that the work that's required needs to be in affinity groups, where it's like a group of Black people working together towards racial justice, groups of white people working together, and then, you know, groups of non-Black people of color working together, right, in their own groups. But there also needs to be cross-coalition work.
Because that's really important, because we need multiple point of views when we're thinking about these things, because we can't just take into account one point of view or one group, because we need different cultures, different races. We need them to have, like, to share points of view with each other.
So we need people,
so that they can all become more informed.
Okay, so hold on. Let me make sure that I got her point right. So we need, as we're working in coalitions together, we need many voices educating each other on their experiences. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So that everyone can see the full picture?
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I just wanted to add to Naima and what Mom said. Being in a mixed coalition group doesn't mean like having 2 Black people and then the rest is white. Like, there should be like more than one of the race that's being affected. Not more than one, but like more than enough of them. And then like everyone else needs to listen and also take action at the same time and help them out and be supporters and be allies.
Can I add on to Garvey adding on to me? What your point was very valid. We need more people of these races, more than enough, but we also need people from the outside looking in. Like, we shouldn't just have more than enough Black people. We need more than enough Asians, more than enough Indians. And I feel like we kind of drive the point of racism a lot towards just specifically Black people, but it's across multiple races, mostly people of color, and we need to acknowledge that, because usually no one really thinks about that.
So it's important for us to recognize that racism impacts every single person in society. Racism even impacts not just Black people and not just one person, and it also impacts white people.
Negative or positive, it still makes an impact, because it's a widespread thing.
We talk about how it's not just about going out to protest. We say that a lot, you know, in our own home, you know, protest is extremely important, but you also have to make sure that laws like Breonna's law for Kentucky, and that's the law that people have pushed through that would ban no-knock warrants, which I think is awesome. Laws like this get passed to ensure that we don't repeat tragic events like what happened with Breonna Taylor. So we have to protest, but we also have to make sure that our laws in our society protect people too. Okay? So how can informed voting contribute to making life better?
It can contribute by, if I think that when you vote, you should make sure that that's what you're looking for, or that's what you think is correct.
I have 2 key points here. One, we should just be informed, but it's not just the president we're voting for. Saying we're voting for the presidential candidate is just scratching the surface of elections. And 2, Sophia said, I'm piggybacking off what Sophia said, we need to have more informed voters to prevent the wrong president. Like, say you vote for a president that just aligns with the party you align with instead of your beliefs. Like, say you aligned with the Democratic Party and you just voted for Democrats. You can't just vote blindly for Democrats. You need to vote for a Democrat or a Republican or a non-partied candidate, but they need to align with your beliefs.
So you're explaining what informed voting is. That's a part of it, right? Informed voting is making sure that you're not just voting party, but you're making sure, and both of you guys covered this, that you're voting for candidates whose messaging aligns with what you believe in. Is that correct, both of you guys?
So I like to say something that even if your party is different for who you vote for, you shouldn't be ashamed for whoever you vote for. You have your own opinion.
So you want to make sure that you're confident enough
to actually vote. And I mean, if you don't vote, you don't have to vote, but you still can't complain.
But your vote stays a secret because
sometimes people tell each other their votes.
Yeah,
but
sometimes people
it's
do.
your
Share.
choice.
So I'm going to ask you, what's another thing about informed voting? Like, if we're going to define informed voting, they said that, making sure that it's not just the party, it's the person, making sure that you are aware of
their
background. What's something else about informed voting?
Make sure that, one, before you pick a party that you want to align with, you want to make sure you research all the topics that it has in it, all the people that are aligned with it, all the things that, you're obligated to according to the party. And then based on that, like Sophia said, don't just vote for your party unless, you have to. But don't just vote for your party, vote for the person theirself, aside all of the parties and stuff like that. Vote for the topics they believe in, vote for the things that they say they're going to do, for congressmen, judges, president, everyone. And make sure before you even go vote, other than making sure you're informed, make sure that you're registered.
I have one more thing. I'm so sorry. But if you vote and you don't like the person who you voted for, next time you vote, you can learn from your mistakes or what you don't like about that person.
Being an informed voter, part of that is also holding the person accountable for what they say they believe.
I love that.
Because say Mom, you become president and you say, okay, bi-weekly we're gonna have a cupcake potluck, and then weeks later you're like, we're gonna have a hot dog potluck. You need to call that person out. You'd need to call Mom out for saying we're gonna have a hot dog potluck when she stated during election season we were going to have bi-weekly
Cupcakes.
cupcake potlucks.
Yeah, cupcakes are completely different from hot dogs. So yes,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right about that.
Did that analogy make sense?
That made perfect sense.
Cupcakes are dessert and hot dogs are a main meal.
Yeah. So how is informed voting part of your anti-racism journey?
This has to be part of your anti-racist journey because when you're voting, you want to not just think about yourself, but think about other people who might be affected by this and think about if they are affected, then how am I going to help change it?
So I have a question. Can candidates learn to be anti-racist?
Yeah, I think yes, because it's not just us doing it's not just common folk doing anti-racist journey. A lot of people have to go through an anti-racist journey.
How about everyone?
Well, yes, everyone also.
But not all people want to, and not all people think it's important to do that. And that's why, that's why we need to have discussions like this
Together,
with your family and with your community to say why it's important.
Or why it's not important.
Do you think it's not important?
I think it's important, but some people don't.
Okay. I think we had a very interesting discussion today. I am super thankful to you guys for being just...
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like, you guys were super vulnerable. Y'all were
awesome.
clear. You shared. You're awesome.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for...
Every single episode.
I know. The root of anti-racism work isn't just about addressing mean words and distasteful actions. Anti-racist work requires individuals and coalitions to reveal and then address the systems of inaccess that disproportionately impact groups of people. This is heart work and head work. This is personal and community analysis. This is community organizing and voting. There is no either or solution in the realm of making change. We need all hands on deck, and we need all people. Before you and your family have a discussion about Breonna Taylor's death, please make sure that you read up on the entire timeline of events. We've linked other interviews and discussions that we've held on talking to kids about race in the show notes. If you have any cool epiphanies that you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments or share them with us on social media.
Each episode, we will share quotes that we find inspirational.
Alice Walker is a short story writer, poet, and social activist. Her quote, "For in the end, freedom is a personal and lonely battle, and one faces down fears of today, so that those of tomorrow might be engaged."
Sandra Day O'Connor is a retired attorney, politician, and the first woman jurist to serve as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. Her quote, "I think the important thing about my appointment is not that I will decide cases as a woman, but that I am a woman who will get to decide cases."
My quote is by Isabel Allende, who is a Chilean writer. My quote is, "It's a wonderful truth that things we want most in life, a sense of purpose, happiness, and hope, are most easily attained by giving them to others."
Gloria Evangelina Anzaldúa was an American scholar of Chicana cultural theory, feminist theory, and queer theory. Her quote, "Though we tremble before uncertain futures, may we meet illness, death, and adversity with strength. May we dance in the face of our fears."
Thank you for listening to the Let's K12 Better podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe.
We want to hear from you. Connect with us on social media at Let's K12 Better on all social media platforms, or connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Mom of All Capes. We're on every podcasting platform, so if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review our podcast. We're trying to reach 100 ratings and 30 reviews by November.
See you next time.